young man named Ye Fan was flying through the sky when dissatisfied voices called out to him. Behind him were three elders. Ye Fan had dared to defy the authority of the heavenly Tao and had slain 100,000 geniuses. The young man raised his sword, ready to accept punishment, as the heavenly Tao stood on his side. They wanted to witness his abilities. Out of nowhere, a powerful bolt of lightning appeared. Ye Fan flew straight toward it, and it seemed as if a shield formed around him. The lightning collided with him. Later, Ye Fan was sleeping in a bed. At that moment, people burst into his room, trying to wake him. The guards couldn't believe he had acted that way, while he himself couldn't yet grasp what was happening. Ye Fan looked around with half-closed eyes, not understanding where he was, but he remembered his defeat. He thought he should have died, yet now the guards were holding his hands behind his back. He was forced to kneel before the entire family, who now saw him as a disgrace, and everyone feared becoming a laughingstock for the other three great families. At that moment, he thought only about what had happened, assuming his soul had descended to earth into the body of a spoiled Ye Fan, whose bullying of the weak was known everywhere. Now the clan had expelled him, falsely accusing him of attempting to harass a girl from the strong family, but he couldn't explain anything. The head of the Ye family, Ye Kang, pointed at him, demanding that he admit his guilt. His soul was that of a great immortal sovereign from the upper heavenly realm, and he had come to this world through soul transmigration, yet in this body he had no way to resist them. Everyone shouted at him, ordering him to answer the head of the family. Ye Kang considered this a violation of the rules, even though he had been warned repeatedly, so he was immediately expelled from the family. The Mutong family rejoiced with delight, while the girl couldn't believe that this had happened. Ye Fan didn't move, so the guards rushed at him to drag him out. At that moment, his eyes suddenly lit up, and flames appeared around him. He felt that even in this weak body, he could release a bit of his aura. With his power, he forced the guards to their knees. The entire family watched as the guards trembled right in front of Ye Fan and were shocked. The men began to tremble in fear, unable to understand what was happening. Ye Fan began to leave, throwing on his jacket and promising to take revenge in the future. He walked down the street, realizing what the world on earth was like. The spiritual energy was thin and completely different from the energies of the upper heavenly realm. He felt saddened that cultivation in this world was not so simple. At that moment, from behind him, he noticed a familiar glow, as if it were the aura of a spirit stone. Ye Fan immediately turned around, noticing a girl wearing a spirit stone. He instantly felt that his identity in this world knew who she was. He approached her, recalling her name, Mu Luoluo, but her expression showed displeasure. Luoluo immediately recognized Ye Fan, and she herself was the daughter of the Mu family, one of the four great families. It turned out she had rejected him many times before, yet he kept pursuing her. From his memories, he found that Luoluo was the only girl Ye Fan had truly been drawn to. Ye Fan clarified that he didn't want that at all, and pointed to the stones on her neck. Luoluo immediately refused him and began to walk away. He didn't expect it to be easy, so he intended to follow her for the sake of the stone. Later, Ye Fan leaned against a tree, surprised that a great immortal sovereign of the upper heavenly realm was now stalking a girl. But fortunately, he could already feel a bit of spiritual energy and decided to try cultivating. He clearly remembered the cultivation methods from his past life. With immortal arts held in his heart, any place could become fertile. Even though the spiritual energy of the earth was insufficient, Ye Fan intended to use it to the fullest. Ye Fan assumed the lotus position, trying to cast aside his sense of self and gather his essence into one, so he could draw upon the power of mountains and rivers. Energy gathered around him and flared into bright flashes of lightning. He found it amusing to begin the path of cultivation from scratch in a new world. He reached the first stage of body refinement and believed he had already surpassed most masters on earth. At that moment, Ye Fan heard cries for help. Luoluo had been cornered by guards in a strange alley, but she didn't understand what they wanted. The men smiled slyly, not expecting that the daughter of the Mu family would truly be as stunning as the rumors claimed. She was shocked that they knew her identity, yet they still acted rudely, even though such actions would bring down the wrath of the four great families upon them. One of them explained that the Mu family had offended a certain lord, so Luoluo's end was near. At that moment, she caught sight of Ye Fan out of the corner of her eye and demanded his help, but he recalled how she had rejected him, so he didn't even consider it. Luoluo begged him for help, promising to do anything. Ye Fan smiled, sealing their deal. He ordered the guards to release her and leave, threatening them with death. They began to laugh at him, thinking he was just pretending to be a prince on a white horse. One of them lunged at Ye Fan with a katana. Ye Fan simply caught the long blade with 2 fingers. He looked at it, realizing there was no turning back. With those same 2 fingers, he snapped the katana in half. With a single motion of his hand, he slit their throats and walked on. The other guards shrank back in fear, while Lualua was pleasantly surprised by his power. He stood before them as lifeless bodies lay behind him. The guard couldn't understand who he was, but he received no answer as a piece of wood flew straight into his face. Yifan hoped that, by the laws of this world, this could be considered self-defense. He approached Luoluo, who was sitting on the ground, indicating that everything had been settled. He reminded her of her promise to do anything and said he would like to collect his reward now. Luoluo blushed, thinking he wanted a relationship with her, but she feared she might not be able to give him everything, as Ye Fan was already reaching toward her. She panicked when he suddenly tore the necklace from her neck, but when she saw what he had taken, she froze in shock. Ye Fan reminded her of his request from earlier that morning, smiling as he took what he needed. Luoluo clenched her fist in anger at how he had deceived her. She continued to fume on the ground as Ye Fan was already saying his goodbyes. He looked at the necklace in his hands. The spirit stone turned out to be even better than he had expected. It would be enough not only for absorption, but also for crafting several pills. 2 full days passed. He arrived at Mishi University. Yifan stood in the square beneath the red flag, advertising blessed Buddhist prayer beads that could bring good luck and protect against disasters. Everyone was shocked to see the son of the Yi family engaged in trade, but rumors had already spread about how he had been expelled. A crowd of teenagers laughed at him, but now he could only rely on himself, and there was no one here who appreciated high-quality goods. He thought he could produce more, but his body was too weak and had consumed almost all the spiritual energy from the stone, allowing him to barely craft 3 immortality pills. He could sell them so he wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing. At that moment, a voice sounded nearby. Someone who sincerely wanted to buy all of his beads. It was Luoluo. Each bead cost 100,000, and there were 3 in total, so Ye Fan demanded 300,000 from her, though he was willing to give a discount of 100,000. Luoluo handed him 300,000, telling him to keep the change. Ye Fan thanked her profusely. He took the check from her hands. Luoluo started talking about his family and decided to add a few 100,000 more, offering to hire him as her personal bodyguard. He snatched the check from her hands. Yifan refused her offer. Luoluo left, angry at his refusal, as she had simply wanted to help him. He suddenly called out to her, advising her to go out less often. The girl grew uneasy, wondering if he knew something. By that time, Yifan was already gone. She sat in the car, and her bodyguard couldn't understand why she would spend such money on Buddhist prayer beads. But Luoluo knew about geniuses who hid their brilliance and suspected that Yifan was one of them. At that moment, a terrifying monster appeared outside the window, smiling at the daughter of the Mu family. The window shattered suddenly, and Luoluo ordered everyone to run. At that moment, the car exploded. A wheel was blown off. All that remained of the car was a flattened wreck. Luoluo was crying, but she opened her eyes to look around. She couldn't understand why she was completely unharmed, but an unknown shield had formed around her. One of the Buddhist beads had crumbled. Luoluo realized that they had saved her life. At that moment, Yifan sneezed. He realized someone was thinking about him, which made him start to get annoyed. Suddenly, someone grabbed his ear and he was shocked. It turned out to be his older cousin, who didn't understand what he had been up to. Yifan asked her to let go of his ear, but he knew how unlucky he was to run into his cousin Yimei. She smirked, having already heard about the chaos he had caused. He was afraid of her because she treated the useless Yifan far too kindly. He smiled, trying to explain that things weren't actually as they seemed. Yimei knew everything perfectly well, but the affairs of the Ye family were complicated, and she thought he had become someone's target. Yifan smiled sincerely at his sister. She was the only person who fully trusted him. The girl suddenly grabbed his hand, remembering that he would now have to take care of himself. They arrived at the Jingwu Taekwondo gym. Yimei announced that from today onward, he would be working there, and the gym belonged to her best friend, Li Shangwen. She had originally wanted to settle matters in her company first so she could find him a better job. Yimei turned to her friend, leaving her brother in his care. The young man immediately put an arm around him, preparing to show him the gym. 2 whole hours passed, and Yifan couldn't believe that he was now working in a Taekwondo gym. He overheard conversations between the coaches and students, but they didn't seem professional as their teachings clearly contradicted fundamental principles. Yifan approached him, explaining that his stance was completely wrong because according to the theory of Chinese martial arts, it blocked the flow of qi and blood in the body. The man grinned, not understanding who he thought he was, because this was a regular Taekwondo gym, not a traditional martial arts gym. Yifan came to a conclusion and decided to ask the council for everything. The coach didn't want to talk for long and immediately tried to kick him, but Yifan easily grabbed his leg because the coach's posture was incorrect and his lower body was unstable. Although the blow looked ferocious, it contained no power. He explained that the proper use of strength should be to lift heavy objects and showed how to do it. Yifan abruptly threw the coach against the wall. All he could manage was a shrill cough. The guy smiled, realizing that he simply lacked knowledge in Chinese martial arts, so he advised him to behave appropriately next time. Everyone in the hall watched what was happening with admiration and shock. They couldn't believe that someone could beat the coach. At that moment, he was called out. The young man fell to his knees, begging the genius to accept him as his student. Ye Fan ordered him to stand up and reminded him that his strike was only a basic technique of using force in martial arts, and he could not be mistaken for an expert just because of that. The boy smiled brightly, believing him to be right. He lacked all the knowledge, but he sincerely wanted to learn martial arts. Ye Fan looked at him and thought, the guy had a very weak body, but a subtle internal energy could be felt around him. He assumed the boy was practicing breathing techniques, but he had no idea. He'd only managed to practice primitive family techniques passed down through generations, but the coach dismissed them as useless. The boy immediately decided to invite him to his home to show him off. The Han family was a distinguished noble clan, and he promised to welcome him well. Yifan wondered what kind of simple family would allow a child to develop inner energy. They quickly left the room together. The coach stood up from the floor weakly and looked at him angrily. Later, they arrived at the Han family's house. Yifan asked not to call him non-master because this nickname sounded strange to him. The boy introduced the master to his great-grandfather Han Chuan, who was the head of their family, and he was the one who taught him that technique. Yifan immediately expressed his respect to the elder Han. The old man rubbed his beard, thinking. He quickly jumped off the ground and rushed towards Yifan. They quickly clashed their fists, and spiritual energy emanated from them. The boy screamed, not understanding what his great-grandfather was planning, but he only wanted to test his master's strength. Yifan was surprised at how energetic the old man was for his age. The old man did not expect to meet a hero among the young people. He was glad that his youngest son had made the right choice. He began to question him about his knowledge, since there were very few people who could block his blow. At that moment, he felt uneasy, and the old man suddenly began to cough up blood. The boy caught him from behind, realizing that his great-grandfather's illness had made itself known again, demanding that he call Dr. Yan. Behind them, the mysterious voice of the doctor, who had come for a scheduled visit anyway, was heard. He understood that the head of the family possessed great virtue and glory, as his ki remained unaltered. Yifan turned to look at him, but I felt that something was wrong with the doctor. They went into the house to the headman's bedroom. The boy was surprised at how quickly Dr. Yang arrived to save his great-grandfather. The doctor asked him to calm down, not intending to let the head of the family get sick. He sensed the old man had been poisoned, and he would use his energy to bring him out. He placed his hand on his chest using energy. Grandfather began to cough heavily. Dr. Yang kept smiling. Yifan grabbed his hand abruptly, not understanding how it could help against the poison. He knew the doctor was only draining the elder's life. The doctor slapped his hand away, not understanding how some brat could interfere with him. Yifan was not so easy to deceive, so he ordered him to stop. Otherwise, no one would be able to help Elder Han. At that moment, the boy called out to his great-grandfather, noticing something. He woke up still coughing. Great-grandfather gritted his teeth, realizing that the problem had been with the doctor all along. He got furious, realizing that the guy had ruined everything for him and was threatening him. Yifan immediately reacted to his attack, and they simultaneously attacked each other in the chest. The old man touched him with his palm, ordering him to pay for this with his life. But Yifan immediately recognized the poison that corroded bones and considered the technique long outdated, since it would not work on him. The old man suddenly began to cough up blood, not understanding how this was possible. Yifan understood that he was dealing with a deceiver who was stealing other people's lives by offering to heal their organ ruptures if he really was a healer. The boy began to beg to save his great-grandfather. He asked him not to be nervous because the problem was only in the poison. Yifan could remove the poisonous spiritual energy so that the old man could be cured. He decided to channel spiritual energy from his dantian, and if it is passed through the 5 elements and the 5 internal organs, it will be absorbed into the body, and with the help of cultivation, the grandfather will be able to quickly recover. Later, the boy ran up happily, waiting for his great-grandfather to get better. He felt his condition improve, as he hadn't felt this good in a long time. He asked his grandson not to cry, as he had brought a great benefactor into the house. Great-grandfather sincerely thanked Yifan for curing the illness that had plagued the Han family for centuries. Yifan admitted that the disease is not that difficult to cure, and admitted that he read about it last year. Great-grandfather used to worry about whether he was fit to be Master Feng Han, but now he realized that he was blind. He asked Ye Fan to follow him. He wanted to present him with the Han family's greatest treasure as a gift for saving his life and as payment for his grandson's education. They arrived at the Han family's plantation. There grew the red flame grass, which the Han family had secretly cultivated for generations. It was one of the finest spiritual herbs in the entire province, suitable for refining spiritual energy or creating pills, doubling the results. Yifan deduced that the Han family were cultivators since they had practiced the family breathing technique for generations and cultivated spiritual herbs. Their family's influence had diminished, and they no longer had the surplus energy to cultivate immortality, so his grandson Han Feng was very fortunate to meet him. The entire red flame grass garden and their family home were completely at Yifan's disposal. He thanked Elder Han for such a gift, as he was just looking for a place to stay. He had no choice but to accept Han Feng as his disciple. The elder laughed at his jokes and was ready to recommend him if money was needed. They then arrived at Mishi, an underground mountain arena. Yifan doubted there was any money to be made here, but the arena was one of the best in Siwa province. High-quality rough stone could easily sell for tens of millions here. Han Feng asked if Yifan had participated in auctions before, offering to explain all the details in more detail, but there was no need. The host urged people to make a decision, as the stones on the table would soon be auctioned. He explained that these were the finest spiritual stones, adorned with black moss. He explained that only experts understand how to increase the chance of greenery. Ye Fan interrupted him, beginning to quote how the laws of heaven are clear, earthly laws are spiritual, yin and yang shape essence, and the spirit of water reveals form. He continued muttering, distracting the presenter. He began to activate the divine eye and lightning appeared from his eyes. Yifan wasn't an expert in bidding, but he knew a trick that allowed him to see the truth. Han Feng couldn't understand where the master was going before the auction began. He began to look at the handful of stones. Yifan noticed something. He approached the presenter, asking the price of this stone. The guy said that the stone looked like a turtle shell and was trash that was hard to make anything good out of. Yifan wanted to take it specifically and ask the price. The host couldn't understand why he wasn't listening to his advice, offering to sell it for 200, which was what a soft-shell turtle cost at the vegetable market. The crowd laughed at his joke. Han Feng didn't fully understand what the master was doing when he advised against collecting all sorts of trash. Yifan showed him how energy awakens in the stone, not considering it as trash. When the stone split, bright green ore was revealed behind it. Han Feng screamed in pleasant shock, causing the stone to suddenly turn green and the entire crowd to turn around. Yifan smiled, saving them time in processing the stone, intending to pay for it. At this moment, the doors of knowledge nearby suddenly opened, and someone was looking for Yifan. The girl screamed, warning him of trouble in the Taekwondo hall. They arrived at Jingwu Gym. Yifan tried to understand what had happened and who was standing in front of them. The guys told him about some local talents who came to the gym and wanted to challenge Yifan, and they offered to represent their gym and fight them. Han Feng began to worry, because those people were known bullies in the Taekwondo circles. He pointed to the chief, whose name was Murong Sanmu. Murong won the Siwa Provincial Taekwondo Championship. Yifan knew that if he beat this guy, he would become #1 in the province. The old man became angry, believing that the boy was overestimating himself by asking Brother Murong to deal with him. The boy asked the master not to rush, thinking that Yifan would not be able to exchange techniques with him. His friend agreed with him that there was no point in wasting his energy, considering Yifan a worthless person who wouldn't be able to withstand even 3 blows. One of them stood forward, inviting him to attack. Yifan didn't want to get involved with them, but he decided to settle things once and for all today, trying not to create more problems at his sister's friend's gym. He introduced himself to them respectfully and asked their names in return. The guy immediately rushed at him with his fists, not wanting to waste time on him. Yifan grabbed his hand sharply, reminding him that he was trying to resolve this peacefully. He kicked him in the stomach. Yifan pushed the fighter aside and headed straight toward the master. The old man did not understand what he was doing. He smirked, knowing that the coach hadn't been strong enough last time and was going to force him to comply this time. The old man tried to hit him, but Yifan deftly dodged it. Yifan suddenly grabbed him by the collar, and he lifted him into the air. He didn't throw him out of the hall only because of his sister. The old man couldn't believe that such a frail guy contained such power. He tried to hit him back again, but Yifan easily stopped his foot. He decided to finally teach him a lesson, since he didn't want to behave appropriately. At this moment, Yifan sensed an impending left strike, and he managed to pull the old man aside. He realized that Mutang wanted to strike from behind. The guy froze in shock, but he quickly struck the old man right in the back. As a result, Ye Fan and he were thrown into the wall. He didn't expect them to strike together, but they didn't look like comrades. Muting insisted on finally fighting together, but Ye Fan saw no point in it. The guy didn't want to chat and had already rushed into battle. Ye Fan dodged his punch, which left a mark on the wall, and noticed that his muscles and bones were indeed honed to perfection. He began to strike him with his fingers on the body, clarifying that Mutang lacked technique and experience. The boy swung, angry at his insults. But at that moment his body began to shake. He did not understand what they did to him. He introduced him to the triple cloud of immortality technique, and he explained that his acupuncture points were now closed. Time passed. Ye Fan looked at the map, figuring this trip was worth it, as there should be higher-level spiritual herbs there. Han Feng got motivated, planning to stop by home to pick up his things and leave in a couple of days. But Ye Fan grabbed his hand, not understanding why he was delaying it so much. He pulled the guy, heading straight to his destination. Ye Fan suddenly jumped into the air, grabbing the young man with him. They flew at a great height right above the city, which was completely visible. Han Feng stuttered in fear, reminding that Hengshui Valley was 100 kilometers away. He landed hard on the roof, dropping the guy. Han Feng was upset that the master did not care about his feelings at all. But at this time, he realized that Ye Fan's abilities surpassed even the first stage of body transformation, since he easily jumped onto a building several kilometers away in a matter of seconds. Ye Fan helped him up after the boy had rested after the flight. He immediately took his hand again. But before Han Feng could even comprehend anything, Ye Fan soared upwards again. Together they flew forward over the buildings. Afterwards, they finally arrived at Hengshui Valley, having covered 100 kilometers in one leap. Ye Fan advised him to practice more so as to keep up with the great immortal lord. He clearly felt that this place was close to the center of spiritual energy, but for some reason it was terribly unstable. Ye Fan started to walk away, while Han Feng tried to catch up with him. He began to examine the plants, which looked vital and vibrant, but they were not spiritual, so another source of energy had to be found. At that moment, a sudden rustling sound was heard in the bushes. Ye Fan shouted, warning Han Feng of the danger. A huge snake twisted him, holding him with its body. Ye Fan rolled up his sleeves, now understanding who was emitting such spiritual energy. Han Feng screamed, feeling that he was only a few steps away from death. He ordered him not to panic and to concentrate better on the circulation of energy and the breathing techniques he had been taught. Han Feng closed his eyes and began to focus on the technique. He now understood how useful the technique was, because the python's pressure no longer affected him. The snake opened its huge mouth right above him. Ye Fan pounced on her, not understanding why she was hunting people. He kicked her hard right in the face. Because of this, she let go of Han Feng, and he ended up in the air. He landed on the ground and they both looked at the monster. Snake took a breath and continued hissing. Ye Fan ordered her to acknowledge her opponent and stood right in front of her. He was able to deftly jump over her bite. It was now clear to him that Hengshui Valley was no ordinary place, since such ferocious monsters were growing there. He jumped off her body when the snake tried to bite him. Han Feng was delighted with the breathing technique. Ye Fan still advised practicing every day so that one could integrate the breath of spiritual energy into every breath. He was still surprised that the Han family were cultivators. Although Han Feng was impulsive, he absorbed information quickly. Ye Fan looked at the snake's body on the ground. He grinned, realizing that with the help of this beast, they would be able to increase their cultivation. Han Feng guessed that this was the 5 elements lizard from their family's records. Ye Fan hadn't expected to recognize this snake, but in all of Mishi, Ye Fan was the only one to refer to it by that name. It was the spiritual beast of Hengshui Valley, rumored to have been absorbing the energy of the earth and heaven for 100 years. Many cultivators tried to defeat it, but they all became its food. Now it was clear why the energy was so strong, because an ordinary beast could not cultivate to such a level. He immediately began the cleaning process. Light elements began to appear from under the snake's scales. Ye Fan began to perform a whole ritual in the lotus position. He did this to create yin and yang. Han Feng watched this tensely as Ye Fan was covered in energy. He asked for his will to be fulfilled and suddenly opened his eyes. His fingers pointed forward as he gave the order. A huge beam of light appeared from the sky. One of the strangers noticed this beam, and the key seemed too powerful to him. The guy immediately flew towards the beam, assuming that someone was cultivating in the mountains. A pile of papers with hieroglyphs was flying in front of him. Ye Fan caught them all in his hand and finished the job. They were talismans that would greatly increase combat power. Han Feng didn't fully understand what they were needed for, since even the black market didn't sell such powerful talismans. Ye Fan showed him a talisman of immense power, which allows one to gain incredible strength for a short period of time. Besides this, there were Vajra talismans that allow movement, so he refined them using the lizard's spiritual energy. He left some for Han Feng, who was just a step away from the great body transformation realm. Han Feng couldn't believe he possessed such capabilities before reaching the great body transformation realm. At that moment, an idea came to him. Han Feng suggested he check out the location of the Five Elements lizard's appearance. He vaguely recalled the place described in the book, and the lizard was supposed to guard the spiritual garden. Ye Fan judged that after defeating him, all spiritual items should belong to them. He never expected that Han Feng would be so knowledgeable. At that moment, they again heard an unknown noise. Yifan immediately realized that there was someone among the trees, and Han Feng realized that the sound was coming from the right place. The two of them flew out to check everything out. Yifan landed carefully among the trees. A tablet with hieroglyphs appeared among the trees. Han Feng cried out in surprise, having no idea what it was. Yifan thought about it, knowing that the entrance to the spiritual garden should be nearby. He couldn't understand how the great Lord of Heaven could forget about the restrictions of the formation. Yifan now understood why he didn't feel anything while searching, because there was a formation restriction crystal nearby. In front of him appeared a 7-star restriction set on the surrounding mountains and dense forest. Then he saw a small northern array of stars in the northern sky's ladle, and one wrong step could ruin all his past efforts. Yifan explained that the restriction was based on 7 stars and drew energy from the mountains and forests. Thus, the restriction could alter the environment and cloud people's minds, preventing them from escaping the restricted zone. Han Feng couldn't keep up with writing down all the new information. Yifan guessed that Tianshu should be located here. It was 7 steps to the west. By this logic, a matrix of 7 stars can be formed. At that moment, the wall suddenly moved. Han Feng suddenly realized that the master was trying to break the restriction by activating the 7 stars. Yifan explained that they had already found all 7 and could proceed. He didn't understand how Yifan knew such ancient information. Yifan explained that in his past life, every other person had this information, so there was nothing special about it. He judged from the garden's appearance that it must belong to some genius. He would like to meet such a one at the end of the era of Dharma on Earth, which would be good luck. At that moment, his eyes widened in shock. A knife flew at him and grazed his cheek. The knife landed in the tree in front of him. Behind him was the guy who had taken Han Feng hostage. Yifan smirked, not expecting the sneak attack. The guy demanded answers, not understanding how they knew how to remove the restriction. His hand suddenly lit up. He was filled with energy, and his gaze was wild, and he wanted to know where they came from, or he would kill them. Yifan believed that no one in this world was worthy of threatening him. The stranger smiled at him, confirming that Yifan was certainly not lacking in talent, since he was able to grow to the 8th stage of the body formation so quickly and kill the lizard. He clenched his fist, indicating that he himself was at a great level of body information, and their powers were far from equal. The guy suggested settling things peacefully, wanting to hear the secret of the constellation. Otherwise, he was going to scatter its remains throughout the forest. Yifan immediately recognized the monkey's hand splitting the monument, which meant that his words about the great transformation stage were not a lie. He decided to attack first because Han Feng was in the enemy's hands, and he needed to inflict serious damage before the guy knew his true strength. A bright light appeared in his hand as he used the 1-star seal. He activated the reception, but this only made the stranger laugh. The guy responded to the technique with his fist. His fist suddenly disappeared into thin air. The stranger opened his eyes in shock, not understanding what had happened. Yifan immediately used the star seal on him. The boy realized that his Dharma seal had broken through his powerful monkey arm. He realized that just one attack would seriously injure him. The guy suddenly took out a bell and started ringing it. The bell flew towards the enemy. Yifan smiled, knowing that destroying the magical treasure would not stop his attack. He sent papers with a spell to him, and at that moment, Yifan exploded. The guy didn't have time to react to his attack, and thick smoke covered him. This caused him to fall to the ground, pressing himself against a tree. The stranger wanted to know who was standing in front of him, because he was at the 8th stage of body transformation, but his speed was much greater than his, and he also possessed talismans and the seal of Dharma. Yifan demonstrated that his experience was incomparable. But the immortal Lord valued human lives, so he ordered him to disappear from sight, and then he would spare him. Yifan turned to Han Feng, but he was almost okay. The guy got up from his knees, considering him too presumptuous. He wiped away the blood, not considering himself a loser. His fingers suddenly began to form signs. The stranger used a bloodthirsty technique. Yifan watched this silently. Han Feng was frightened by this technique, but it was a simple spell that greatly increased spiritual power and explosive power, which consumed 20% of the user's blood. The spell only lasts 20 minutes, and even if it ultimately wins, it will fall at the opponent's feet at the end of the fight. The guy didn't understand who was standing in front of him, but he still wasn't going to let him go. The madmen quickly rushed towards Ye Fan. They clashed fists and their energy exploded. An explosion occurred between them, and they both disowned. Han Feng saw that their enemy had skills and could go all the way, but his face seemed extremely familiar. He suddenly remembered that he was a member of the Song family from Xihua province. Ye Fan didn't expect the Song family to be famous, but Han Fen had once seen his family during his visit to Mishi, and the Songs had always wanted to weaken the power of the major families in Mishi in order to gain power over them. The guy didn't understand what was wrong with that, and regretted not having ripped out his tongue right away. He smiled, not connecting their murders with his family. In the Dharma-ending era, every piece of spiritual material was a treasure, so he wanted to seize it if he could. Ye Fan reminded that one must be capable to do this. He applied the talisman to himself, and he activated the talisman of gigantic power. At this moment, Ye Fan jumped off the ground, and he jumped on the enemy with his fist. He hit the guy sharply who didn't expect it. The enemy flew back several meters, but he managed to land on his feet. He realized that his strength was still not enough for the battle. Therefore, he was ready to sacrifice his life once again and activated the bloodthirsty technique. Ye Fan grabbed his hands. Their hands clasped and did not give way to each other. But the guy didn't understand how some cultivator at the 8th stage of body formation forced him to sacrifice 40% of his essence and offered him to raise his level right now. Ye Fan simply agreed. And I decided to show him my body formation, since that's what he wanted. The guy laughed that Ye Fan believed his joke, because even the geniuses of Tiansu would need 2 whole months of seclusion to reach the great body formation stage. He laughed at him, not believing that Ye Fan would be able to break through the realms right here, because then he should be an immortal sovereign. Ye Fan closed his eyes, making a breakthrough. He suddenly appeared right in front of him, confirming his words. Ye Fan struck him. The boy noticed the palm strike, realizing that Ye Fan must have the power of the 9th stage of refinement. Ye Fan felt that his strength was still insufficient. He couldn't understand why his opponent's strength was growing when he was at the 8th stage when they met, and perhaps he could actually pass through realms on the spot. Ye Fan closed his eyes. The guy understood that he had to eliminate him now, otherwise he would cause a lot of problems in the future. He didn't want to give him even a chance to continue cultivating, so he jumped on him. Ye Fan stood calmly and breathed. At that moment, he teleported to the other side, dodging the blow. Ye Fan began to mutter, while dodging the enemy's blows. He continued to mumble until the boy could not understand anything. Han Feng watched their fight as a red whirlwind formed and Ye Fan flew through the air. He couldn't believe that in front of him was a cultivation technique that was more like martial arts. The guy appreciated his interesting trick, but still wanted him dead. A second later, Ye Fan was already standing on his shoulders. He explained that most cultivators in the Dharma-ending era have not received the true teachings, and they often think that body formation means polishing muscles, bones, and skin to a hard level. Han Feng's mouth dropped open in shock. The guy couldn't believe it either, but in reality, the shortest path to mastering the art of body formation is relaxation, especially in critical moments. Only calm in a desperate situation can prove one has fully mastered the foundation of the shell. Ye Fan successfully broke through to the great realm of body formation. The guy screamed loudly in rage and despair. He immediately approached Han Feng, asking if he'd watched the movements. He had, but apologized for his stupidity in failing to understand the principles of his movements. Ye Fan understood everything, intending to reveal deep secrets to him once he reached a sufficient level. The guy looked at them with anger, not understanding how a man had broken through the kingdom right before his eyes. He believed that no one in the entire Xihua province could compare to him except his great sect elder. He panicked, worried that he might die right there. Ye Fan placed his hand on his shoulder, not understanding where he was rushing to. Han Fen recognized the Netherworld Ghost Sect. The sect operated secretly, and he himself did not know much, but he heard that it was one of the most influential sects. There were rumors that the Song family and the Netherworld Ghost Sect were closely related, and judging from his behavior, it was true. He took him by the hood, offering the master to take him to the Mishi to help the 4 great families identify their main enemy. Ye Fan asked him not to rush, as he had a better idea. He used the spiritual technique of confusion. The guy suddenly woke up and screamed in fear. He fell abruptly to his knees, acknowledging its power, and begged for mercy. The guy hugged Ye Fan's leg, promising that he wouldn't tell anyone about their meeting. Ye Fan felt sorry to kill a person at the great body formation stage. He agreed with him, asking to let him go, and then he would work for him. Ye Fan smiled, catching him on his promise. He snapped his fingers, and then the guy was bound with spiritual rings. Ye Fan decided to demonstrate his sect's secret technique and warned that if anyone was eavesdropping on them, he should leave quickly. He realized that the observer had decided not to leave. Therefore, he teleported right behind the stalker, wondering who sent him. The guy immediately became scared and begged him not to kill him. He abruptly threw him from the tree, believing it was too late to spare him. The boy fell straight to his knees in front of Han Feng. Yifan introduced him to their new test subject for him to take action. He shared the cultivation method with him for the student to learn. Han Feng received the information and understood everything. She screamed sharply, and his hands became covered in fire. The boy tried to renounce him in fear, but Yifan held him tightly. Han Feng twisted his hands, causing a fiery whirlwind to appear. He hung in the air, and Yifan praised him despite his rudeness. Yifan introduced him to the Dragon Flame Palm technique and suggested that they practice it more when they returned, but for now they had to go. He dragged the tied-up carcass behind him. They entered the portal and a beautiful garden appeared before them. Yifan knew he would be here. Han Feng didn't understand what it was. He showed him a type of spiritual plant called the puppet flower, and it was the main material for making the second-level puppet pill. And with the help of such a pill, he will be able to control this guy at the first stage of body formation, making him subordinate. He pressed his finger sharply to his forehead. Yifan had sucked out his soul to create the puppet pill, but he had decided not to teach this method to Han Feng yet because it was too difficult. He raised his hands, beginning to combine the ingredients for the pill. Han Feng couldn't believe that the master had broken through more than 2 levels in one day and was easily creating a second-grade pill. A second-level puppet pill appeared in Yifan's hand. He grabbed the guy's face sharply and fed him a pill. And at that moment, a spot on his forehead lit up. He instantly fell to the floor in front of his master. Yifan ordered him to heal his wounds and return to the Song family, acting as usual. Now that he became his puppet, he could get resources from other families and learn news. At this point, it was already time for them to go home, but the phone rang. They started shouting about trouble into the phone. Deliver the monthly report to President Ye. At this moment, Yifan, who came to his sister for information, entered the office. The sister asked him to calm down. The news reported that several magazines published an investigation into the quality of Mail.ru cosmetic products. An examination showed that most of the company's products do not meet standards and cause skin ulcers. Yifan immediately realized that the problem lay with the company. Among those who complained was even the mayor's daughter, and she wouldn't have done it on purpose, so someone else intervened. Yifan thought about Ye Yun's gang, realizing that they had first thrown him out of the family and were now trying to harm his sister. She didn't have any evidence yet, and she first wanted to resolve the issue with the mayor's daughter. Yifan asked her not to worry and just managed to prepare several new spiritual potions, and one of them could help her. His sister had no idea that he could make spiritual potions, but he asked her to just wait. 3 days later, he brought her a flask with that same potion. Yifan called it natural water that can heal any scars, ulcers, and even wrinkles, making the skin look younger. His sister even promised not to bully him anymore if he really could create such a product. She dropped a drop onto her finger. The room suddenly filled with rose petals. She touched the product to her skin, and she was immediately filled with a feeling. The sister wanted to know where he got such a potion. Yifan explained that he made it himself and promised to share the formula later, but offered to start production right away. At that moment, something was whispered to my sister. She screamed at the information that the mayor of Misha wanted to meet with her this evening. She was informed that the mayor was looking for her because of problems with his daughter, but thanks to his potion, they were saved. Yifan was confident, but decided to attend the meeting as a company representative. The sister doubted that they would be able to cope with everything, because the company had been faced with a lot of problems. Yifan understood that they would need an independent production chain, a strict security system, and something else. The company's budget was limited, and they didn't have the funds to do everything he said. Yifan immediately handed her a card with a 30 million account balance to solve all her problems, while he took care of the rest. She couldn't understand where he got so much money, but Yifan knew that it was not unusual for him to lack money. It turned out that he stole Wu Yangming's wallet from the sect, not expecting to find so much money. His sister felt that he had become more mature after leaving the family, so she entrusted him with the meeting with the mayor. Han Feng began to beg to be taken along to the meeting. Yifan offered him a deal. If he could advance to the 3rd stage of the body formation before leaving, then he would take him with him. He accepted his argument. They arrived at the Mi family's private residence. Yifan explained that the current mayor was the head of the Mi family, and it was now clear how they had entered the ranks of the 4 great families. They began to walk into their mansion, and Han Fen knew that the mayor was considered a genius of the current century. Han Fen said that the mayor awakened his spiritual energy at the age of 8, And at 16, he reached the great stage of body formation, and at 30, he had already become an expert in the initial stage of formation. But he still couldn't compare to Master Yifan. They walked up to the table, and he immediately recognized the representatives of the mailing company. The mayor stood in front of them with a glass of red wine. Yifan extended his hand to shake his, introducing himself. He greeted her, introducing himself as Mi Tianshu. The boys shook hands and felt the power. A vortex of spiritual energy formed around them. Food from the table began to rise into the air. Tianshu couldn't believe that in this guy's hands, his spiritual energy simply evaporated. He felt like the guy in front of him was in the middle stage. At that moment, the mayor's little daughter appeared at the door, asking permission to enter. Tianshu gave her permission to enter the room. She looked at the unknown people, assuming that they came from a cosmetics company. Tianshu didn't understand why Madame Yimei didn't come herself, but Yifan should also know the reasons for this meeting, so he would like to know how they wanted to help his daughter. Yifan suggested that they use natural water. The mayor heard from doctors that the wound on her face was incurable. Yifan suggested that they try it, and if it didn't work, he was willing to hand over the mailing company to them. The mayor began to apply the product to his daughter's face, and at that very second, the stain disappeared. The mayor was in complete shock and wished he could buy every copy of this product. Yifan explained that his duties were only to deliver a trial sample, and mass production had not yet begun. The mayor was surprised that it could be put into mass production. Tianshu suddenly pulled his fist and wanted to strike. Yifan was surprised, not expecting this, but he was able to quickly hold his fist in his hand. He quickly threw the mayor over himself. The man was able to land on his feet. He jumped sharply off the ground, activating the technique. The mayor jumped on him with a kick, but Yifan hit him beforehand, causing him to fly back. He suggested asking everything directly if he was so interested in abilities. Tianshu heard that Yimei's younger brother was just a spoiled spendthrift who wasted his life, but his skills said otherwise. Yifan explained that he had changed a long time ago and was now moving step by step towards success. The mayor became interested in his words, and he doubted that Mishi had an equal rival. Yifan continued talking about the product and its mass production, which was possible because he could prepare countless spiritual medicines. At that moment, the flask in his hands cracked. He offered him cooperation if the mayor was interested. Yifan heard that the Mi family owned a holy spring and wanted to take ownership of it. In exchange, he offered 40% of the sales of natural water. Tianshu considered that the market price was approximately 10 million per 100 milliliters of product, meaning annual production would exceed 200 million, and with Yifan's support, the Mi family would be able to compete with the Chengjitan family, the dominant pharmaceutical company. He extended his hand, accepting the offer. They shook hands, hoping for fruitful cooperation. Later, they finally walked out of the building, and Han Feng was terribly sleepy, and Yifan even regretted taking him with him. The driver stood in front of the car on the orders of the mayor, who asked him to take the guests home. Yifan wanted to gladly accept the offer, but he was interrupted by a loud voice. Mulaluo, whose father wanted to meet him, appeared next to him. Yifan didn't expect such a proposal, but she invited him to the Mu family, waiting for an answer. He had completely forgotten that despite the Mi family's power, the Mu family was still the head of the 4 influential families, so he had no intention of refusing such hospitality. Luo called him to get into the car. They got into the car where their butler was inside. Yifan didn't understand why the Mu family needed him so suddenly. Luo slowly sipped her drink and decided to explain everything. Several important members of the Mu family were attacked. 2 of them were killed and others were seriously injured. They even managed to attack her right in front of her house, but Yifan's Buddhist prayer beads saved her. He realized that the Mu family was in serious trouble and suggested that they involve experts at the final stage of the body formation. But in the past few days, the Mu family had already lost 2 experts, and if they didn't deal with the enemy now, the losses would only mount, and the family's advantage would fall compared to others. Yifan understood everything, and even after so much effort, the Mu family still didn't know their opponent's face, and he was sure that the Netherworld Ghost Sect was involved. He explained that if she wanted protective talismans from him, he had almost none left, but he had one high-level defensive talisman that could withstand a short-term attack from a body formation expert. It will also help block the blow of a novice cultivator. Luluo exclaimed in joy that this could help her, and if she gave it to her father or grandfather, it would give them a huge advantage in battle. Yifan began to ask what the Mu family was willing to exchange this talisman for. He has heard about their spiritual tree. Luluo understood that he was talking about the fire orange tree, but she couldn't make such decisions. Finally, they arrived at their destination. She didn't understand why he went out. They were met by Luoluo's father, Mutianya, who wished to welcome such a distinguished guest. He immediately realized that it was that same Yifan standing in front of him. They shook hands. The father had also heard about Ye Fan because his daughter admired him. Ye Fan started talking about the fire orange tree that he wanted to see. Loluo began to whisper something in her father's ear. At that moment, he was shocked. Tianya agreed, inviting him to follow him. They arrived at the Mu family's spiritual garden, where a beautiful, huge tree stood. Yifan touched his log, feeling that it was well taken care of. The father offered to show the second-class protective talisman in exchange, since the tree suited him. He immediately took out the talisman to show it. Tanya was pleased with what he saw. They were both satisfied with the deal, and Yefan finally wanted to take the tree. He cast a spell, starting to take it away. Tongues of flame appeared from his hands. The tree was surrounded by the flames of his reception. He clapped his hands sharply. At that moment, the orange tree disappeared from its place. Tianye immediately recognized the technique of the universe, which was the art of the immortals, which was practiced only in the heavens or beyond. Yifan was about to leave now that the deal was completed, but Tianye wanted to introduce him to his father first. He turned around and was surprised. The head of the Mu family, Mu Qingmo, appeared in front of him and was amazed by the young man. A couple of days ago, Han Fen told me about the Mu family. 3 generations of the family lived under the same roof. Mu Qingmo was over 100 years old, and his strength was at the peak of the body formation stage. His son, Tianye, was at the late body formation stage, and it was they who supported the Mu family. Yifan immediately felt the peak speed of the body formation. He was surprised how the head of the Mu family had concealed everything so easily. The old man was amazed at his insight and asked him to keep everything a secret, lest others learn of his breakthrough. But he asked about his strength in response. Yifan decided not to lie, since they had moved on to revelations. A vortex suddenly formed around him. He demolished everything around him, including all the members of the Mu family. They couldn't even stand on their feet anymore because of the force of the wind. Tianyi couldn't believe that Yifan's strength had already surpassed a profound formation expert. Mukingmo was terrified of the younger generation, and in 100 years, only today did his eyes truly open. Yifan smiled, hoping that everyone now understood his true strength. He admitted that he was invincible in Mishi. Everyone's mouths dropped open in shock. The old man did not argue with his words, but then he hoped for his help, offering 10 stalks of second-grade spiritual medicinal herbs and 30 stalks of first-grade ones for his consent. Yifan thought about this good proposal. They shook hands and came to an agreement. Loluo kept wanting to know who Yefan really was and whether she could get closer to him. Some time passed. Han Feng stood on the rooftop behind the watching youth who was reporting to the Netherworld Ghost Sect leader that Yefan had contacted the Mu family. At this moment, he used the Dragon Flame Palm to strike him. The guy managed to dodge to the side. He immediately recognized Yefan's 6. Both of Han Feng's hands were burning with fire, and he considered himself not a 6th man, but a senior disciple, and was going to take revenge for spying on his teacher. Ye Fan at this time was getting out of the car. Loluo didn't expect him to leave the car so early, since they hadn't arrived at his house yet. He just wanted to take a walk. She conveyed her father's words that he could always turn to their family if he needed help. Ye Fan handed her something. It turned out that he gave her a protective talisman. In her hands was a dragon-shaped keychain. Loluo immediately recognized the very powerful talisman, not understanding why he was giving it to her. But Ye Fan was no longer in front of her. She pressed the talisman to her chest, feeling a pleasant sensation. Ye Fan walked along the dark street, sighing deeply. At this moment, Han Fen flew out from the bushes, apologizing for being late. Ye Fan wanted to get information after his observation of the surroundings, and Han Fen told him how he discovered the spy. He did everything he could, but his skills weren't enough, so he ran away. Ye Fan was confident that the spiritual energy was still focused on the enemy, so he could track it. Energy flew into the sky as he used the 1-star seal. He ordered that the incident be reported to the Mu family so that they could clean up the mess. The Mu family arrived at the scene where the spy's body lay on the asphalt. Tianya was shocked that Ye Fan had managed to form a partnership with the Emi and Mu families overnight, and this would be a turning point for the entire country. He promised that he would deal with him soon. Later, Ye Fan sat in the water in the spiritual herb garden and cultivated. He opened his eyes abruptly and frowned. A huge sphere of water appeared above him. This sphere suddenly burst apart. Ye Fan rose from his stance, pleased with the result. He had successfully reached the foundational stage. The body had reached the foundation, and all that remained was to accumulate spiritual chi. As he flew over the city, he noticed a girl at the gate. He immediately descended to the ground. Ye Fan managed to catch her before she lost consciousness. Later, the girl slowly opened her eyes, and Ye Fan noticed that she had woken up. She had a lot of questions about the unknown guy in the place. Ye Fan promised he wouldn't harm her, as he'd only helped her out of a fainting spell on the street. He disguised himself beforehand, unsure how to look her in the eye. He introduced himself as Yan Fan and explained that they were at the Han family estate. The girl thanked him for his help, introducing herself as Murong Yu. There was chicken broth on the table to make her feel better. Yifan wondered why she suddenly lost consciousness on the street. She admitted that her family kicked her out and she had nowhere to go. Yifan thought about it, realizing that he might have been the cause. Murong Yu really liked the taste of the broth, but it was a spiritual food that he personally prepared with the addition of a first-rank elixir. He suggested that she stay here since she had nowhere to go so that she could recover. But he didn't offer her to live here for free, since she would still have to help with the housework. Yifan called Mutianya abruptly. He said that after killing that spy, the enemies began to lose patience, and they would like to attack first, but they hide too well. The old man said they had an idea to lure them out. They wanted to hold a tournament to recruit fighters and pretend they were looking for people, and they have already managed to bite. Yifan promised to arrive soon. He arrived at the martial arts tournament arena. The host announced the top 20 fighters in the tournament would be eligible to join the Mu family, each receiving a minimum of 5 million. The higher the winning position, the greater the reward, and the winner would receive a first-rank immortal pill. Yifan immediately noticed their uninvited guests in the crowd, who were 9th-level body tempering masters. The presenter announced the start of the fight. The fighters fought hard on stage. One after another entered the ring to fight for a place. The spy entered the ring against the fighter and was immediately recognized as one of the 10 elders of the Shao family. Yifan was very surprised by this information. He pushed the enemy back with one fist, not expecting it to be so easy. The boy began to loudly condemn the fighters from Xiwa province, believing that even the children in Donghai fought harder. He was advised to moderate his ardor. The man stepped into the ring against him and flew into the air as the spy continued to insult him. He got angry, intending to put the impudent puppy in his place. The spy pulled out his sword, which was emitting a purple aura. The spectators recognized Mr. Shu, who would definitely crush the brat in the ring, and even Ye Fan admired the old man. He sent the sword towards him using a fire spell, an explosive flame, but the guy responded with the art of the phantom killer. Therefore, he easily repelled his attack. Yifan realized that his blade contained souls and was definitely created through blood sacrifices, so Old Man Shu would lose. The spy continued to press the old man. He was already out of breath. The guy immediately noticed this and decided to deliver the finishing blow. Old Man Shu was shocked that the boy still had the strength for a second strike, which meant he was at the stage of laying the foundation. His shield didn't work, and the soul almost attacked him. The fire beam destroyed her, and the battle ended with his defeat. Yifan, who decided to become his next opponent, rushed onto the stage. The guy underestimated him and immediately started insulting him. He immediately pointed his sword at him, using the art of the transparent assassin, a double strike. No one could believe that the guy released 2 killer attacks at the same time. Yifan passively used the first star seal. His souls flew away from his beam, and this beam pierced his sword, which he did not expect at all. He wanted to know who exactly he was fighting. Yifan simply introduced himself with his name. The audience was immediately shocked to learn the name of the heir who was kicked out of the Ye family, but they were surprised by his strength. Then Yifan wanted to know the identity of his opponent. He cracked his fingers, regretting that the enemy was only at the initial stage of laying the foundation. Spy was shocked when he didn't see Yifan in front of him, but he suddenly saw a fist next to him. Yifan launched a sudden attack that knocked the enemy off the stage. The old man watched this with shock. All the spectators could not look at such a powerful whirlwind. The spy couldn't understand what kind of magic it was. Yifan didn't use any magic, it was just a simple punch. The boy threw away his broken blade, not yet considering himself a loser. A huge purple beast appeared in front of him. Yifan finally waited for his opponent to decide to use his fists. So he prepared his burning fist to hit him in the face. He suddenly delivered a fiery blow. But before him there was only fog. At that moment, a silhouette appeared in front of him. The spy screamed, using the art of the phantom killer, the appearance of a ghost. Everyone suddenly began to be seized by fire and madness. Yifan smirked, not expecting him to play a trump card. He used the blood blade technique again, trying to attack him. Yifan decided to end this farce already. His feet left the ground. A fiery whirlwind swirled around him. He closed his eyes and concentrated on the seal of the second star. A sphere began to form in his hands. Its light blinded everyone around. The old man couldn't understand what kind of monstrous power was stored in Yifan. The families thought he was a deity in the flesh. The spy could not withstand such power. The attack left a huge hole in the ground, and a body lay on the ground as Yifan celebrated his victory. His friend came up to him to check on his condition, but at that moment a huge green hand appeared from the ground. It was Old Man Mu who grabbed him, not intending to let the impostors go so easily. He used the art of wood and forged it in his hand. He was constricted, but he began to use spiritual technique. Then Yifan approached, not wanting to let him escape. He instantly placed his palm against his chest. The old man came down, not understanding why Yifan killed him, but he believed that one prisoner was enough. He placed his palm on his other breast. Yifan only demanded answers from him about his identity. He looked at his friend next to him, who was lying unconscious. The guy introduced himself as the grandson of the great elder of the ghost sect, Mo Yu. Yifan grinned, realizing that the ghost sect was appearing more and more often. He decided to ask directly about the ghost sect's plans to destroy the city. Mo Yu pretended to have no idea what he was being asked. Yifan's eyes suddenly glowed purple as he asked again. Under hypnosis, Mo Yu gave a complete answer. They wanted to destroy the city to attack the Mu family, as they were preventing the sect from taking over Siwa province. The previous family head, Mu Qingmo, had disappeared after reaching the peak of his body tempering. The Sun family, who were under their support, believed that the Mu family had acquired a foundation stage master, which threatened their position, hence their order. Yifan now realized that the three great powers of Xihua province were mere pawns. The old man hadn't expected these sects to have taken such deep root in the province. He began asking about the sect's location and the strength of their great elder. Mo Yu explained that their base was hidden in the Xixing Mountains, and that his grandfather, at the 8th foundation level, was the strongest in the sect. Everyone was shocked by this information, but Yifan was disappointed that the strongest in the sect was only at the 8th level of foundation establishment. This information was enough for him, and he reached out his hand to it. The beam suddenly pierced the guy through and through, causing him to cough up blood. The old man was worried that Yifan had killed the Grand Elder's grandson, but he wasn't afraid of him, and since they now knew the sect's plans, the Mu family had to do something. The Mu family was currently at a disadvantage, as even his strength was barely enough to reach the first level of foundation establishment. At this time, the great elder of the ghost sect was already at the late stage of this same stage. He turned to Yifan, realizing that he already had a plan in mind, and asked him to guide him on the right path. Yifan asked them to destroy the Sun family in Xihua, and then join the Golden Sword sect or the Mystery sect to contain the Ghost sect. Meanwhile, in the Hall of the Ghost sect, Old Ming's life tablet and young master Mo Yu's life tablet were broken. The old man quickly went to report this to the great elder. There was a loud cry in the temple, and he could not believe that his dear grandson was dead. The elder was furious, wanting to know who did it and was going to grind the killer into dust. Old man Mu supported Yifan's idea, because if they destroyed the Sun family, the Mu family would become one of the three great Xihua clans, and if they allied with one of the light sects, they would have reliable support and the ghost sect would not attack. Yifan planned to break through to the foundation stage so they wouldn't have to bow to anyone, but he lacked the resources to cultivate. If his body and spirit reached the early foundation stage, he could easily defeat the enemy in the late stages. The old man approached him, telling him about a secret auction in the capital of Xihua province, where spiritual stones could be found. Yifan smiled, planning to visit the capital. He advised me to visit the Tuntian auction and take Lulu with me, who knew all the rules very well. The Mu family sincerely thanked him for his help. Otherwise, their family might not have survived the crisis. They wanted Lulu to marry Yifan, to forever bind their family together. The guys on the street were discussing that the first master of Mishi City was the former heir of the Ye family, and that he single-handedly destroyed the foundation stage invaders who attacked the Mu family. He was told about Yifan, who killed 2 foundation masters at once, without even stabbing them in the back. Yifan at this time finally returned home. He was met by Murong Yu while he was telling about his journey home. She was kicked out by the Ye family and left on the streets without money, and the fact that she agreed to live in a stranger's house showed how desperate she was. At the meeting, Yelong was given full responsibility for the situation. Yifan's sudden appearance upset the balance of power throughout the city and even the province. And if the rumors reach Yikong, they will definitely end. The guy smiled, knowing that Yifan had already reached the foundation, and even the head of the family would not have the strength to compete with him, so no one would be able to stop Yifan if he returned to the family. Yilong stood up from his chair abruptly, angry at Jianming for trying to make him the scapegoat, so they waited for him to come up with solutions. Yilong explained that they could kill Ye Chang by stealth. Jianming believed that they were just a bunch of weaklings at the 8th level of body tempering, and Ye Long, who had barely reached the 9th level, and they wanted to kill Ye Chang, who was at the peak of the 9th. Yilong couldn't believe that Ye Fan alone could have turned the situation in the city upside down. Judging by the mood, they could attack at any moment, so they'd have to flee the city. Yifan arrived at the dungeon and was not expected to be there at all. He smiled, reminding her that he had promised to return. The grandfather patted him on the shoulder, having no doubt that his grandson would return. He wanted to know what exactly had happened during this time. Ye Fan explained that he had fallen into a trap set up by Ye Long and Ye Tian, who had planned it all long ago, and that Xiao Hong, who served Grandpa, was also working for them. Grandfather promised to deal with the traitors, but first he wanted to see Ye Fan reach the foundation stage. Ye Fan immediately crossed his arms to show. Grandfather became nervous when he saw such spiritual power. He hit the ground with a powerful slam. From this, a huge beam struck the sky, which everyone around saw and thought that the head of the family had broken through again. Grandfather understood that even he could not pierce the earth all the way to the heavens, and was amazed at how he could become the strongest master. He guessed that the elders of the Ye family were currently sitting in a panic and deciding how to deal with him, so he called him. The two of them flew up into the sky. When they landed, the crowd bowed to the leader. Grandfather ordered the guards to ring the ancestral bell to gather all the Ye family members at the ancestral square, even including all the elders from the council hall. They were shocked when they saw Ye Fan return to the family. The family greeted the head respectfully, not understanding what the old man wanted from them. Ye Ting gritted his teeth in anger when he saw Ye Fan, who had the courage to come back. But Ye Fan didn't respond and simply looked at them. The guy jumped at him with a cannon fist, angry at being ignored. Ye Long screamed, trying to stop Ye Tian. But he could no longer stop and almost struck. Ye Fan stopped his fist with one hand. His mouth dropped open in shock, frozen in fear. Ye Fan threw it away with one hand. Ye Long quickly flew towards Ye Tian to save him from falling. They couldn't believe his terrible power. Everyone's mouths dropped open as Ye Fan was actually able to kill the Foundation Master, and with just one hand he was able to injure Ye Long. The guards greeted the chief and the young master on their knees. He reminded that no one dares to raise their head without an order, as this is considered an insult to the dignity of the head. So he executed one of those who dared to raise their heads. Ye Long froze in fear as he saw an 8th-level body tempering elder killed so easily before his eyes. The commander explained that he had been informed of Ye Long and his accomplices conspiring against Ye Fan, and their guilt had been proven. He announced the death penalty for the ringleader, according to clan law, and that the remaining accomplices would be held in water prison for 10 years. It was clear to them that they were no longer welcome in the Ye family, and they had to quickly escape from Mishi to another province. Ye Fan immediately predicted his escape and aimed a beam at him. The two of them were shot by energy and hit the wall. Ye Fan promised that karma would catch up with everyone, and he didn't care about the rest, but he pierced it through for himself and Ye Mei. Ye Fan wanted to take his life for this. The commander watched this silently, approving of his action. Ye Fan announced that he was now in charge of the Ye family, and the purge of the elders was now complete. He had no intention of touching others, but he made threats. He had no intention of sparing those who had bad thoughts. The Ye family owned the largest forge, and they were the best artifact craftsmen in Mishi. He planned to select 10 clan members, and the top 5 would be determined at the blacksmith's tournament in 3 days. An internal martial arts tournament would also be held there, where the top 5 fighters would be chosen. Only those who could prove their strength could take the elders' places, and in 3 days, 2 tournaments would be held in the Hall of Ancestors. Grandfather praised him for his excellent work and was at peace, leaving the Ye family in his hands, preparing to go into deep seclusion to try to break through to the foundation stage. Ye Fan reminded that there was still an unresolved issue between them. He wanted to make a promise from him, reminding him that outdated views had hindered the family's development for years, and that the era of feudalism was long gone. Ye Fan wished that Grandfather would stop using cultivation and come down to the common people to look at the ordinary world. Grandfather flew into the sky, accepting his request. Later, he received a call that a Tongqian auction would be held in the capital of Zihua in 5 days. And this time, there should be spiritual stones there, and even more than usual. But at auctions of this level, barter is often used, exchanging spiritual items, elixirs, or artifacts. Han Fen offered to help prepare the spiritual items, but he had already prepared everything. He believed that the rare treasures he took from Old Ming to buy the spiritual stones would be more than enough for him. Ye Fan quickly picked up the bag. He laid out the artifacts on the table, listing what was inside. There were 3 second-rank protective talismans, 1 second-rank Qi cultivation pill, 3 second-rank Qi restoration pills, 5 first-rank cultivation pills, and 10 first-rank Qi restoration pills, and as many as 5 sets of medicinal herbs for creating Sea of Qi pills. He was certain that a Sea of Qi pill with a 75% effectiveness could definitely be exchanged. He guessed that Mo Yu had collected so many herbs to order the Sea of Qi pill. All these pills were created by one person, and apparently the ghost sect had a skilled alchemist. He was planning to break into the sect to seize this alchemist for himself. In the meantime, Yefan decided to use the Ye family's earth flame to create pills. He entered the temple and was greeted by the head. An earthly flame appeared before him, the foundation of the Ye family. Thanks to it, the family was able to attract numerous blacksmiths and create a gigantic guild of craftsmen. But because of Yelong's greed, many left. So at the tournament, he was going to select the best ones to create artifacts to exchange for spiritual resources. He took out a bright pill with high quality. He wondered if there was anything else of value hidden in the earthly flame, deciding to use his spiritual sense for this. He was able to discover the fiery lotus of the earthly flame. Yi Fan never expected that the Yi family would have such a treasure. He jumped sharply into the flames, and with the help of a water shield, he broke through the fire. He walked among the lava in a water bubble. Yi Fan found a suspiciously smooth granite, although at this temperature, even stones would melt. In the distance, he noticed a guardian spirit. He saw a bright blue spiritual flower. Yi Fan directed a beam towards him. A magma frog jumped out of the lava. Unlike other toad monsters, she has a drop of fire dragon's blood running through her veins, allowing her to swim in magma as easily as in water. Such a frog definitely has a monster core at the foundation stage. Cores work almost like a spirit stone and can also be used in alchemy. He rushed forward, intending to get the core and the fire lotus. The toad opened its mouth and a very long tongue appeared. Yifan blocked the attack with a starlight strike. The toad was able to jump away from his beam attack. At that moment, a blue sphere flew at him. He was able to parry her blow. The toad flew off the ground and continued jumping. His large hand reached out for her, and he climbed right into the toad's mouth. Spiritual power containing innate chi is incredibly beneficial to a frog, as it is to any other creature. He decided to subdue it with such bait to save a lot of effort. He was able to take the toad into his hands and make it his spirit beast, calling it Hogo. Yifan stroked the frog, asking it to serve faithfully and truly, and then the owner would not hurt it. He looked at the flower, touching it. Yifan was able to obtain 6 rank 2 cultivation pills to advance even further. He drank them straight away. He was immediately hit by the 9th level of body tempering. Yifan was informed that the guards had prepared everything for the tournaments, and the guests had already gathered, so they were only waiting for him. He went to the square for the tournaments. The guy suddenly noticed an animal on his shoulder. Yifan appeared on the stairs in the main square. Everyone greeted the leader respectfully. Yifan thanked the guests for their visit and announced the opening of the Blacksmiths and Fighters tournament. The Blacksmiths tournament will take place in the Forging Hall, and the winners will be determined in a single round, with the top 5 selected based on the quality of the artifacts they craft. The fighting tournament will take place in Ancestors Square, and only the strongest of the hundreds of participants will make it into the top 5. Yifan announced the start of the competition and waited for the results to be reported. The elders turned to the Ye family leader. Noticing that his family members had gotten rid of their arrogance and had become calm, everyone was confident that the Ye family would soon produce many talents. Even though he had become the head of Ye, he was more accustomed to hearing their old appeals. He turned to Elder Han, the mayor, and the head of Mu, asking them to be calm, promising to keep his word. Since he became the head, the composition of their alliance of 4 families should also change. Yefan announced that the Ye, Han, Mi, and Mu families would be included, expecting their objections. The Ye family was a great clan in Mishi City and the best blacksmiths in the province, possessing a wealth of resources, and it was a great honor for the alliance to accept the Ye family. But the main thing was that the current head of the family was Ye Fan, who needed to be held and carried out his instructions. Yifan suggested finding a suitable name for the alliance, and the Ye family officially joined. A clover appeared on his hand, and since there were 4 families within the alliance, he suggested the name Clover. The 4-leaf clover will become their emblem, and from now on, the power of the 4 families will be concentrated in an alliance under the control of 4 leaders. Yefan promised that the Clover Alliance would become one of the strongest factions in Jiwa province, and they were going to destroy the Sun family. They rose from their seats, supporting the leader. The Fan family promised to buy 10 million worth of pills to support him. Yifan remembered that he had just wanted to extract resources from them, and thanks to this, the other families would also have to fork out some money. They all raised their fists, and every family was ready to support Yifan with their money. He declared that Misha's prosperity was the merit of not only the 4 families, but of all the clans, and only together could they lead Misha to a great future. Yifan approached the Fan chief, offering to share the table at the upcoming banquet. He knew that the Fan family was aware of its place. After all, it was a 3rd-ranked clan that had only recently risen, and their assets barely exceeded 200 million, but he would not deprive those who supported him. And from today on, the Fan family would become a second-rank clan. The Clover Alliance had just been established, and Ye Fan hoped that everyone involved would remain sensible, and the meeting was over. Meanwhile, in the temple, the chief's subordinates arrived to see him. They came to report news about Ye Fan and the Mu family from Mishi. The man handed him a report from their spies about the new Clover Alliance, where 4 families had united. And before their eyes, Ye Fan declared war on their Sun family. The leader didn't understand what he was trying to achieve. He smirked, intending to help Ye Fan die if that was what he wanted, and ordered Shuixing to send people to Donghai to get his brother, so that he would return to Xihua immediately. And when Mao returned, he was going to personally send Ye Fan to the next world. Ye Fan not only killed the Foundation Masters, but also killed their Roof, the grandson of the great elder of the Ghost Sect, and Old Man Ming. He was overcome with anxiety and fear. He was afraid that he would not be able to cope with it even if Old Man Min lost. He decided to report everything to the Ghost Sect first. Ye Fan was going to give everyone a position to evaluate their abilities based on how they perform. If they can pass his test, he will make them masters of the Foundation stage. All the guys were happy, motivating themselves on how they would break through. Ye Fan realized that it was time to go to Xihua. Han Feng was given the order to take Chief Ye to Tongqin Tower. In the back seat, Ye Fan cultivated while others arranged meetings for him, and he could prepare for the attacks of the Ghost Sect. They drove up to a large building. It's time to head to the auction.